The fantasy films of the 80s were a land of pretty much all male dominance when it came to lead characters. Women were relegated to side roles, backup, or more typically, the princess in need of saving. Thanks to movies like Conan the Barbarian and Conan the Destroyer, big male warriors were creating their own subgenre in the fantasy landscape. But that was going to change with a film that happened thanks to Conan's popularity. Red Sonja would blaze across the screen for the first time in live-action movie in 1985, and it would see the first major screen role for Brigitte Nielsen and Arnold Schwarzenegger's last real fantasy role until 2017. One of comics and fiction's most badass women warriors, Red Sonja would sadly see its star heroine be overshadowed on her own movie poster by her male co-star. Let's go back to the 80s and hear the legend of the flame-haired warrior known as Red Sonja.
Don't be a fool. I don't want to kill you.
Try it.
Red Sonja began her life as a Marvel Comics character in the mid-70s, at least the Sonja we know today when we think of the name. Roy Thomas and Barry Smith would write the character into the Marvel Conan comics series. If those names sound familiar, it's because we mentioned them in our Conan the Destroyer episode, as they created the original story for that film and would eventually use that story in a Conan comic as originally written. Red Sonja was actually based off of a character created by Conan's maker Robert E. Howard in 1934. In that story, The Shadow of the Vulture, Sonja's name was Sonja with a Y, and the story is actually historically based in the 16th century. The story would eventually be retooled for the Marvel Comics, where Thomas and Smith would bring Sonja into the Hyborian Age setting of Conan and the legends of that time. Where Howard's Sonja was a warrior who used guns and had the red hair we all know, the new Sonja in the comics was a wicked swordswoman with a tragic history. She also started out far more clothed than she'd eventually wind up, eventually being decked out in a all-chainmail bikini. Sonja would stay with Marvel through the mid-90s and in 2005 would move to Dynamite Comics, where she is still published to this day. Most notably, writer Gail Simone would helm the comics with Dynamite, which would see Sonja cross over with a number of other female characters. One of my favorites, Vampirella, would join forces with her a few times. Sonja's stories were massive and would indeed see her appear with Conan more than once as well. So when time came for a feature film version, Dino De Laurentis decided to take advantage of the relationship that had been built with Arnold Schwarzenegger and the popularity of the Conan films to make Red Sonja. Originally, the film had been planned for 1983 with Ralph Bakshi helming it. This would have actually followed the original Conan film rather than Destroyer. As it was, Destroyer was released, and while it didn't make a return like Barbarian, the film did well enough that the producers brought back its director Richard Fleischer to helm Red Sonja. The film's plot follows the comic introduction of Sonja. It starts with Sonja waking up after a brutal attack by Queen Gedren and her soldiers. Sonja's family is murdered, and she spurns Gedren's advances and scars her face. Gedren orders her soldiers to rape the young woman, and she is left to die. Sonja is awakened by the voice of a beautiful spirit from the forest. In the original comics, she is the Scottish goddess Scahash. She gifts Sonja with amazing fighting skills.
For your sword arm must have no equal. I give you that strength.
In both versions of the story, she accepts the gift on the condition she will have sex with no man, unless the man bests her in combat. Now, in the movie, I don't remember this being really made that clear when I was a kid, but the fight scenes with Schwarzenegger later on now make a lot more sense.
The only man that can have you is one who has tried to kill you.
Sonja trains to better her skills, and her surviving sister Varna is a priestess who takes care of an artifact known as the Talisman, which created the world. The Talisman can only be touched by women, a nod to those who have the power to birth life. Men will cease to be if they touch it. Varna is the only survivor after Gedren attacks her order and steals the Talisman. She is hurt, but found by Kalidor. We'll get into Kalidor and who he actually is later on.
We must find my sister.
Kalidor goes to find Sonja and brings her back to her dying sister, who makes her swear to stop Gedren and her plans with the artifact, which can destroy with the powers of storm and earthquake.
The talisman, as terrible
Sonja leaves Calidor behind and runs into some victims of Gedren's attacks, Prince Tarn and Falcon, his bodyguard. Tarn's kingdom is destroyed because he refused to give in to the queen.
She knocked down half the city with her new weapon and demanded our surrender.
I refuse to surrender.
So she knocked down the other half.
She discovers where Gedren is and heads to confront her. On the way there, she's nearly raped by Lord Brightag, whom she kills, and assisted by Calidor, who has been following her.
Get away, go!
What about you?
I can hold them!
Sonja runs into the bratty Prince Tarn and his bodyguard again and frees them from bandits, and the party join together at last to take on Gedren.
Proclaim my arrival and the defiance of Queen Gedren. Sound your trumpet.
Oh, keep quiet.
Gedren, however, is superpowering the talisman by leaving it in a chamber of candlelight, as it is light that powers it. When she sees Sonja is on her way to them, Gedren traps the trio in a cavern with a mechanical monster bent on killing them. There's no explanation for how this was made in a time before any tech really existing, and Calidor once again appears and helps save the day. After this fight, Calidor and Sonja bond, and he makes a move only to be told Sonja can only be with a man after he defeats her in combat.
No man may have me unless he has beaten me in a fair fight.
Enter the sexual tension sword fight that seemingly goes on all night. Not a good choice if you plan on going into battle the next day. The group has been made whole, with Sonja finally accepting Calidor's help, and the final showdown happens with Gedren. The talisman is about to go nuclear, and Gedren is mad with power and doesn't care. Sonja and Gedren sword fight, rather awkwardly. It would also appear that Gedren built her castle on a pesky volcano, and now there's a lot of lava under them. Sonja skewers Gedren through the heart, and she pulls a Hans Gruber, or Darth Maul, your choice, into the lava. Sonja throws the now out-of-control talisman after her, and it explodes. With the castle falling in around them thanks to the surprise volcano, the group escape. Sonja and Calidor find the wonders of equality and share a kiss, and the film ends with bratty Prince Tarn, now less bratty, and off to remake his kingdom.
Come along, Falcon.
Red Sonja was filmed around Italy in 1984. Originally, Sandahl Bergman, who had starred in Conan the Barbarian opposite Arnold as his love interest, was offered the role of Sonja, but she opted instead to be a villain this time. There were a number of actresses who were looked at to be the lead, but no one truly fit the bill for De Laurentis until literally only a few months before production was to start. It was then he saw the 6'1" Brigitte Nielsen on a magazine cover. With a wig to add the red hair, Nielsen was cast with no acting experience as Sonja. Ernie Reyes Jr., who was making the rounds in the 80s in a number of films, was cast as Prince Tarn, with Paul Smith as his bodyguard, Falcon. A couple of other familiar names for fantasizing about fantasy films fans would be on the actor list as well. Pat Roach and Sven Ole Thorsen would play Lord Brightag the Rapey.
I have fought 177 men, and only one survives, and he has got no legs.
And one of Brightag's bodyguards, respectively. Director Richard Fleischer had a good relationship with Schwarzenegger, but as production continued, it was clear that the producers, namely De Laurentis, had not been completely truthful to the actor. When Arnold had agreed to be in the film, it was as a cameo role. But as filming kept going and he saw the script, his cameo role was growing and growing until Calidor was a full-on co-star. Arnold wasn't thrilled with the change or the deception.
Nobody pays me. And if I think somebody owes me something, I take it.
This would end up causing him to cut ties with De Laurentis and his contract with them. Over the years since the film was completed, Schwarzenegger has been pretty open about his dislike of the film, stating he would threaten his kids with watching it if they got in trouble, and calling it the worst film he's ever done. It's rumored even his ex-wife Maria had made jokes about it, stating if his career could live through it, it could live through anything. The reason De Laurentis did this was a twofold problem. The rights for Conan were with Universal and he couldn't get them. The second was he didn't have a massive budget, so he had to use trickery to get Arnold on set as a cameo.
That's logic.
So he went for the cheaper rights to the gettable Red Sonja and changed the name of Conan to
Calidor,
with the fans being smart enough to realize exactly what was going on. Unfortunately, the script and story, as well as the budget, didn't equate to the level of the previous Conan films.
Come on, put your back into it!
Calidor wasn't in fact a canonical traveling name, quote-unquote, for Conan. This idea was something later created by fans since it was obvious to everyone that Arnold's character was completely his Conan the Destroyer version of the Barbarian, who was far more talkative and jovial. One of the other aspects that stood out that hindered the film was Nielsen's lack of screen acting and experience. Her performance in the film is stiff and a bit unemotional.
Don't make me angry, Calidor. I don't need any man's help.
But again, she'd had no real acting training when she was brought in. Later in the year, she'd play Ivan Drago's wife Ludmilla in Rocky IV, where the lack of emotion would work in her favor, as she was supposed to be an Ice Queen Russian stereotype.
Good luck. I hope after we can be friends. I hope so. Of course, they're sportsmen, not soldiers.
But I can't really put a lot of blame for the film's issues on Nielsen. She was young and inexperienced and offered a leading role alongside one of the biggest movie stars of the 80s. Why wouldn't you take that? While Red Sonja isn't a total failure and does have some neat moments, it's great to see a female swordswoman on screen like this who isn't overtly sexualized, which is funny considering the comic middle bikini version. Red Sonja is a lot like Conan the Destroyer in that it has this dirty little secret vibe to it that just feels weird and shows some of the odd choices to Sonja's character creation and story. Gedren wanted Sonja in a lesbian storyline that sort of glossed over with Sonja's disgust at the thought.
Queen Gedren, who wanted you for herself.
Gedren then punishes her for spurning her by having all of her soldiers take turns raping her. This is glossed over with a very brief flashback. Then the spirit goddess makes her promise not to take a man as a lover without his being able to beat her in combat, which is an odd way of making a woman who has survived a horrible attack have to fight someone she loves and lose just to be with them.
You didn't seem to want a man's help, but you needed it.
There are also some scenes with Prince Tarn, such as her training him and Tarn making a move on Sonja, which she picks up on right away.
Gently, I see. Like this?
Your Highness learns fast.
Smooth Tarn, real smooth. Conan didn't have to deal with a little kid in his films, but you get the feeling they wanted to show a motherly aspect to Sonja with this choice of a character being in the film. It just comes across really awkward. The 13-year-old Tarn keeps trying to tell Sonja she can be his cook and to be in his court, much like the 14-year-old princess in Destroyer wanted to marry Conan. Red Sonja doesn't really let Sonja be as big a badass as she truly is, like in the comics. This was due to the production company really wanting this to be a third Conan film, so Calidor shows up out of the blue to help save the day. The battle with the mechanical dragon is around 90% Calidor flailing in the water with it and Sonja jumping over to pry an eyeball out of it. The film also has a very, very short runtime, coming in at 89 minutes. Thanks to the PG-13 rating, there's not a lot of blood in this film. Destroyer, with its PG rating, actually had a lot more blood and disturbing bits. Yes, I know I keep referencing Destroyer, but it's hard not to when that film actually has a female warrior in Zula that has no problems being as vicious as they come and beating up on literally everyone. The one thing that everyone seems to agree on this is good about Red Sonja is the music. This was composed by the legendary Ennio Morricone, who would score numerous classic films, including the Dollars trilogy of westerns. Red Sonja didn't do well at the box office. With a budget of just shy of $18 million, it only made back less than $7. It was trounced by most critics and, as said, is considered by Arnold the worst movie he has ever done. Red Sonja, though, would keep popping up in pop culture. Of course, there's the comics, but she would also appear on TV opposite Conan in the Conan TV series in 1998, played by Angelica Bridges, in an episode titled Red Sonja. Recently, in 2015, a motion comic based off of Gail Simone's Red Sonja was released on DVD. For years, there was talk of a new Red Sonja movie. At one point, Robert Rodriguez and Rose McGowan were going to make a new Red Sonja together back in 2008, but this never came to be. McGowan would actually co-star in the Jason Momoa-led Conan remake in 2011. As of now, a new Red Sonja is supposed to be released in 2024, based on the Dynamite Comics line. This being the 50th anniversary of the character, there was a trailer for the film shown at San Diego Comic-Con in July. Matilda Lutz is playing the new Sonja, and the film is directed by MJ Bassett. In interviews, Bassett has said that the new film is going to change the origin of Sonja, taking out the rape attack that spurned her on her path, and the new film would focus on a new path for her. To quote, "Sonja's journey is to be an allegory for more existential questions around the survival of the species in the face of climate change." So I guess we'll see how that plays a role in a Hyborian age. I'm going to hope the new film gives Sonja her due. While it was rare to see a female-led sword and sorcery epic like Red Sonja back then, sadly the producers didn't have faith in her. Everything that was wrong with Red Sonja is personified in the movie poster, which shows Arnold Schwarzenegger given first billing, and so large on the artwork, his sword looks the same size as Red Sonja as he looms over her. It shows that Red Sonja was never given a true shot at being the icon she is. Red Sonja is an interesting figure with a complicated backstory that can cause a lot of people to be nervous because of what it entails and takes on. Sonja, at the end of the day, gets her strength from her survival. She may have been brutalized by men, but she is not destroyed or defined by them. She's an equal to any of them, and in the pages of her story, or as it plays out on screen, she survives. While it is a strange sort of gift that has been given to her when it comes to her power, the fact is that in order to be with her, you have to be worthy of her, and you can't really argue with that. These days, we have a lot of examples of warrior women in pop culture, but Sonja was one of the first to lead the charge on the printed page, and she's still waiting to really make a leap to the big screen with a film that's worthy of her strength and badassery. Come on, Hollywood. Let the redhead shine.
I know you're a brave girl, but danger is my trade.
Then I'll learn it by myself.